Most people just saw beauty. When they looked at the ballet, they saw grace and movement, the performance. But Edgar Degas didn't sit in the audience. Sometimes he sat behind the orchestra. He didn't paint the performance. Rarely, in fact, he painted the very few dancers actually dancing. He painted what I like to call biba, B-I-B-A, the before, the in-between, and the after. And not just what it looked like, but what it felt like to experience it from the inside. Every morning, the market wakes up before the city fully opens its eyes, and for me, entering a place like this feels like I'm stepping backstage before the performance. And like Degas backstage at the ballet, what interests me most is not the performance, but the quiet moments that happen, the Biba moments. Before we dive into how Degas saw his world, and keep in mind for nearly the last 40 years of his life, how his eyes allowed him to see was constantly changing, and not for the better. Degas was born in Paris in 1834. He was born into a family of bankers, his dad being from Paris, and his mom was actually from New Orleans, Louisiana. I think he met his first major influence in 1955. He met a guy named Ingres, whom he revered, and advice he never forgot. He told him one day, he said, "Draw lines, young man, and still draw more lines, both from life and from memory, and you will become a good artist." I think the next gentleman that had a major influence on Degas was this guy named Hiroshi. He was one of the major artists of Japonisme. And again, I apologize if I get all these names and things wrong, but hey, we're doing the best we can. Traditional Western art often adhered to linear perspective and balanced compositions. In contrast, the Japanese prints frequently utilized flat planes, oblique angles, off-center subjects, creating a sense of spontaneity and movement. Japanese woodblock prints, with their focus on the ephemeral nature of life, they resonated with Degas' desire to capture the transient moments of modern life. In 1864, he was sitting in the Louvre, as he often did. He was copying some paintings, and he found himself one day copying the same painting as a guy named Manet, not to be confused with Monet, which he'll meet him shortly, but Manet. Manet was his link to the group of artists that later became a name that Degas made no question that he did not prefer. It's called the Impressionists. We've highlighted a couple of these guys on the channel already, Monet and Renoir. And more to come as we take a deeper look into some of the other individuals and as a group, because it's quite a story the way they carried on and on about each other. Degas became a major part of the creation and the presentation of the exhibitions in Paris from 1874 to 1886, while he was repeatedly clear that he preferred realist or independence, and is quoted as saying, "What a pity we allowed ourselves to be called impressionists." But I think that one of the biggest differences that he saw, and he can agree on, most of the group became known as painting en plein air, and Degas, not so much. And by far, I think he's known for his dancers, and over half his works are the dancers, and they were observed, studied, sketched, and painted inside. Inside, it sounds like a simple word. But for Edgar Degas, it defined everything about how he worked. Not just physically being inside a building, but inside the scene. Because inside the scene, to me, that's where observation lives and breathes. Observation on the street has to be my kind of street photography as well. I've never been one to get all up in someone's face and just snap. It's just not me. Inside the market, the rhythm's different. Every corner becomes a small piece of work. Outside the stalls, the day just keeps on moving. But every now and then, that market will give you a quiet moment. You've realized you're just not passing through it anymore. You're slowly becoming a part of it. Being on the inside, as Degas did, we can just find comfort in just observing, because he felt that his spontaneity or impression of a moment came from his years of study and observation. And through these years, he was always obsessed with movement. To me, the dance class that Degas painted in 1873 is a perfect example of creating movement within a frame. And I also think it's a master class how he layered the subjects from his viewpoint throughout the frame. Look how the eye will travel across the painting. Dancers entering from the left, down the stairs, across the room. In the foreground, you got a bench, a conversation, someone tying a shoe. Girl stands there apart, watching. In the middle ground, you got another cluster. The light pulling us toward the back room where another group waits. And then, we got whites, grays, and beiges. They all hold the frame together. That's just color cohesion. But in it, he teased with small little bursts of colors, just enough to keep the eye moving around. From a distance, everything feels like movement. People arriving, bargaining, passing food and money hand to hand. In a way, it's a choreography repeated every day. But Degas rarely painted the performance. He spent a lot of time studying gestures, hand adjusting a shoe or tying a ribbon. And here in the market, I noticed the same thing, the choreography of exchange. Movement isn't always a whole lot of motion. Sometimes it's just a gesture, a decision. By gestures people repeat every day. Degas cared more about the process than he did the result. One of the best stories I know about Degas comes from a conversation he had with a guy named Voillard. He was an art dealer in Paris, broker, pretty much the guy you needed to know in Paris to help you out as an artist, very influential. Voillard once asked to see a sculpture Degas had been working on. Degas showed him a lump of clay. Voillard was just shocked. He said, where is it? It was beautiful. And Degas said something to the effect of, he said, all you care about was what it was worth. He said, I wouldn't take a bucket of gold for the feeling that I had by tearing it down and getting to do it all over again. He showed us how to observe, study, and then capture. He showed us that the before, the in-between, and the after is very often a better story than the performance. So what did Degas show us that we can look at our photography? Well, I think his sketchbook. I've always had sketchbooks myself growing up, art school, and carried one ever since. The hardest thing about starting a sketchbook? Starting. Second hardest? Just putting the pencil to the paper without the overriding fear of criticism or judgment from somebody else. But the one thing we forget about that sketchbook, we don't have to show it to anyone, ever. And that's what I'm going to try and start creating my own photo sketchbooks. I guess I have in the past, sort of. But again, quite often fall victim to the fear of judgment and criticism. We all go out with our camera and look for the best shot. But, how do we get that best shot? Like anything else in life, practice. So a couple of things I'm going to try, maybe you can try too, is when I'm out, just take images, a lot of them. Don't think about anything, just press the shutter. And when you get back home, here are 4 ideas that you can ask yourself about your work for practice. Timing. Did I shoot too early or too late? Hidden discoveries, Zoom in on your picture and look around and see what you didn't notice when you took it, but it'll give you some ideas of things to look for next time you go out and shoot that you really liked. Composition play. Here's where you can zoom in and test your crops and framing. You may have captured somebody right in the middle of the frame. Push them to the side. Push them up. Push them partly out of the frame, as Degas did with many of his dancers. Number 4 is motion feel. Find that shutter speed that matches the feeling of the moment. Does the image you take portray what you felt when you took it, or was it a little bit busy or a little bit moving? You want people to just feel the movement. Slow that shutter speed down just a little bit. Degas once said, art is not what you see, it's what you make others see. I've had a lot of fun imagining how Degas would have photographed these Vietnamese markets, and I'm pretty sure he had a good time from the inside. And I think he'd probably bring us one more quote, and it might be something like, photography is not what you see, but it's what you make others feel. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching. Always appreciate you. And next time you're out with the camera, look for some of those Biba moments for your photo sketchbook. And as always, create something real.